The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Houston skyline as Jasmine Davis stood before the full-length mirror in her downtown office, adjusting her silk blouse one last time. At 32, she had just been promoted to Senior Marketing Director at one of Texas's largest energy companies, a position she had earned through years of dedication and exceptional work. Her reflection showed a confident, accomplished woman with elegant box braids swept into a sophisticated updo, warm brown eyes that sparkled with pride, and a smile that could light up any room. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father, Marcus. "Ready for our celebration dinner, baby girl? I've got reservations at the Heights, that new place everyone's talking about." Jasmine's smile widened. Her father had always been her biggest supporter. From the moment she declared she wanted to be a businesswoman at age 7, through her years at the University of Texas, and now in her professional life. She quickly texted back, "Wouldn't miss it for the world, Dad. See you at 7. The Heights was Houston's newest upscale restaurant, housed in a beautifully restored Victorian mansion in the historic Heights neighborhood. Its innovative fusion of Southern and French cuisine had earned rave reviews, and reservations were nearly impossible to get. But Marcus Davis, a respected civil rights attorney, had his ways. As Jasmine navigated through Houston's notorious evening traffic, her mind wandered to all the celebrations she and her father had shared over the years. Her high school graduation, college acceptance, her first job offer. Marcus had been there for every milestone, usually with a thoughtfully planned celebration. This time, he had insisted on making it extra special. The valet took her car as Jasmine approached the restaurant's entrance. The restored mansion was impressive, with its wraparound porch adorned with delicate Victorian trim and warm lighting that made the whole place glow like a jewel box. She spotted her father waiting by the entrance, distinguished in his charcoal gray suit, his salt and pepper hair neatly trimmed. "There's my executive," Marcus called out, enveloping her in a warm embrace. "You look beautiful, honey." "Thanks, Dad," Jasmine replied, straightening his tie with familiar affection. "This place is gorgeous. How did you manage to get a reservation?" "Let's just say I helped the owner with some legal matters a while back." Marcus winked. "Shall we?" They entered the restaurant, where crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over the elegant dining room. The maitre d', a middle-aged woman with a warm smile, greeted them immediately. "Welcome to the Heights. Your table is ready, Mr. Davis." As they followed her through the restaurant, Jasmine couldn't help but notice the understated luxury of the place. Original hardwood floors gleamed beneath their feet, and the walls were adorned with local artwork that celebrated Houston's diverse culture. Their table was perfectly situated near a bay window overlooking the carefully manicured gardens. "Your server will be with you shortly," the maitre d' said, helping them get settled. "Congratulations on your promotion, Ms. Davis." "Mr. Parker mentioned it was a special occasion." Jasmine thanked her, touched that her father had made sure the evening would be memorable. As they perused the menus, they fell into their usual comfortable conversation, discussing everything from Jasmine's new responsibilities to Marcus's latest cases. "I'm so proud of you, Jasmine," Marcus said, his eyes twinkling. "You know, when your mother was still with us, she always said you'd do great things. She'd be over the moon seeing you now." Jasmine felt her throat tighten with emotion. Though her mother had been gone for 15 years, moments like these made her presence feel so close. "I wish she could be here," she said softly. "She is, baby girl. She is." Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of their server, Connor Miller, a tall man in his early 30s with neatly combed blonde hair. As he approached the table, something in his demeanor shifted subtly. A slight tightening of his jaw, a coldness in his blue eyes that hadn't been there when he'd served the couple at the next table. "Good evening," he said, his voice carrying a hint of tension. "I'm Connor, and I'll be your server tonight." His eyes barely met theirs as he spoke, and when they did, they held none of the warmth that typically accompanied such greetings. Jasmine felt her stomach tighten. She recognized that look, that tone. After years of dealing with subtle and not-so-subtle discrimination, she had developed a sixth sense for it. She glanced at her father, who gave her a slight nod. He had noticed it too. But this was her celebration, and she refused to let anything dampen her spirit. She straightened her spine, smiled warmly, and asked Connor about the restaurant's wine selection, determined to maintain her dignity and enjoy her well-deserved evening of celebration. Connor's response to Jasmine's wine inquiry was curt and dismissive. "We have a wine list right there on your menu," he said, pointing without actually looking at them. "I'll give you a few more minutes." He turned and walked away before either Jasmine or Marcus could respond, leaving them in an uncomfortable silence. Marcus reached across the table and squeezed his daughter's hand. They shared a look that spoke volumes. Years of experiencing such treatment had taught them both how to communicate their frustration and support without words. Jasmine squeezed back, drawing strength from her father's presence. As they studied their menus, Marcus discreetly pulled out his phone and placed it on the table, angled slightly upward. To anyone else, it might have looked like he was just checking messages, but Jasmine knew better. Years of documenting civil rights violations had taught him to be prepared. When Connor finally returned, his demeanor had somehow managed to become even more hostile. He stood slightly farther from their table than necessary, as if proximity might somehow taint him. "Have you decided?" he asked, his pen hovering over his notepad with impatient expectation. "Yes," Jasmine replied, her voice steady and professional. "I'd like the pan-seared sea bass with the seasonal vegetables, and we'd like to start with the chef's selection of appetizers." Connor didn't write anything down. "The sea bass is very sophisticated. Are you sure that's what you want?" His tone carried a clear implication that made Jasmine's chest tighten with anger. Marcus cleared his throat. "I believe my daughter knows exactly what she wants," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had served him well in countless courtrooms. "I'll have the same. And please bring us a bottle of the 2018 Caymus Cabernet." Connor's eye twitched slightly at Marcus's tone. "Of course," he replied, his voice dripping with barely concealed disdain. "Anything else?" "That will be all for now, thank you," Jasmine said firmly, maintaining eye contact despite Connor's obvious discomfort. As Connor walked away, Jasmine took a deep breath and smiled at her father. "Tell me more about your latest case, Dad. How's the education reform lawsuit going?" Marcus began sharing details about his work, and they fell into an animated discussion about the changes he was fighting for in the Texas school system. It was their way of refusing to let prejudice control their evening, of claiming their space in this elegant restaurant, just as they had claimed their spaces in boardrooms and courtrooms. The appetizers arrived, delivered by a different server, a young woman who smiled genuinely and arranged the plates with care. But when their main courses came, Connor was back, practically dropping the plates on the table. The sea bass, which should have been artfully presented, looked hastily plated. The sauce splattered messily around the edges. "Is everything to your satisfaction?" Connor asked, his tone suggesting he cared little for the answer. Jasmine examined her plate carefully. "Actually," she said, her voice level but firm, "this doesn't look like the presentation I saw at other tables. Could you please check with the kitchen?" Connor's face flushed red. "I can assure you, ma'am, that's exactly how it's supposed to look. Perhaps you're not familiar with fine dining presentation." Marcus's phone shifted slightly on the table, its camera lens catching the interaction. Jasmine noticed other diners at nearby tables, beginning to take notice of Connor's tone, some showing obvious discomfort at his behavior. "I'm quite familiar with fine dining," Jasmine replied, her dignity intact despite the mounting tension. "I'm also familiar with professional service, which seems to be lacking at the moment." Connor's nostrils flared. He reached for Jasmine's plate, his movements sharp and aggressive. "Let me take that back to the kitchen then, since it's not up to your standards." As he lifted the plate, his hand jerked deliberately, causing the mustard sauce to splash across the table, speckling Jasmine's silk blouse with yellow dots. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Connor said, his voice thick with false concern. "How clumsy of me. I suppose some people just aren't meant for places like this." The restaurant seemed to freeze in that moment. Other diners stopped mid-conversation, forks hovering in mid-air. A woman at the next table gasped audibly. Marcus's phone remained steady, capturing everything. Jasmine sat perfectly still, her heart pounding but her exterior calm. She had faced discrimination before, had dealt with subtle prejudice throughout her career, but never had it been so blatant, so aggressive. In that moment, she felt the weight of every slight, every dismissal, every time she'd had to work twice as hard to be considered half as good. But she also felt something else: resolve. This wasn't just about a ruined blouse or a spoiled dinner. This was about dignity, about justice, about making sure this never happened to anyone else in this restaurant again. She looked at her father, whose eyes held both fury and pride, and gave him a slight nod. The time for documentation was over. The time for action had come. Marcus Davis slowly placed his phone face down on the table, his movements deliberate and controlled. The restaurant's elegant dining room had grown uncomfortably quiet, the usual clinking of silverware and murmur of conversations replaced by a tense silence. All eyes were on their table, where Jasmine sat perfectly still, yellow mustard dots marring her silk blouse. "Mr. Miller," Marcus said, his voice carrying the same measured tone he used in courtroom confrontations, "I believe we need to speak with the owner, Mr. Parker, immediately." Connor's smug expression faltered slightly. "I don't think that's necessary. Accidents happen after all." His attempt at innocence rang hollow in the charged atmosphere. "Oh, but I think it is necessary," Jasmine spoke up, her voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath her composed exterior. "And I think Mr. Parker would be very interested in reviewing the events of this evening. All of them." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Connor's face as his eyes darted to Marcus's phone. Before he could respond, James Parker himself appeared at their table, his face etched with concern. The restaurant's owner was a distinguished man in his 60s, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that spoke of both success and taste. "Marcus, Ms. Davis," Parker addressed them, having clearly been briefed about the special occasion when the reservation was made. "I was just informed about a disturbance." "What seems to be the problem?" Connor straightened his spine, ready to defend himself, but Marcus held up a hand. "James, I think you should see this first." He picked up his phone and turned it toward the owner, pressing play on the video he'd been recording. The color drained from Parker's face as he watched the footage. The subtle sneers, the condescending comments, the deliberately poor service, and finally the accident with the mustard sauce, all captured in high definition. But more than the individual actions, the video revealed the pattern of behavior that left no doubt about Connor's intentions. Other diners who were close enough to see the video gasped at certain moments, their own realization of what they'd witnessed hitting home. A young couple at the next table, who had received exemplary service from Connor earlier, looked particularly mortified as they understood the stark contrast in treatment. "Mr. Miller," Parker's voice was ice-cold. "My office now." He turned to Jasmine and Marcus, his expression shifting to one of profound regret. "I cannot begin to express my shame and apologies for what has happened here tonight. Please, allow me a moment to handle this situation, and then we need to talk." As Connor and Parker disappeared toward the back of the restaurant, a young woman from the kitchen appeared with fresh napkins and club soda for Jasmine's blouse. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her eyes sincere. "We're not all like that here." Jasmine nodded in acknowledgement, but remained quiet, processing the events of the evening. She had come here to celebrate a professional triumph, a moment that represented years of hard work and dedication. Instead, she found herself at the center of another battle against racism, one she hadn't chosen but couldn't ignore. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "You okay, baby girl?" "I am," she replied, and she meant it. Despite the humiliation she'd endured, she felt a strange sense of purpose growing within her. This incident, as painful as it was, could become something more than just another story of discrimination. It could become a catalyst for change. From the direction of Parker's office, raised voices could be heard, though the words were indistinct. Several staff members huddled near the kitchen entrance, whispering among themselves and throwing concerned glances toward Jasmine and Marcus's table. The regular rhythm of the restaurant had been completely disrupted, with servers moving uncertainly between tables, trying to maintain normalcy in an anything-but-normal situation. A few minutes later, they watched as Connor stormed out of the office, his face red with anger, and headed straight for the employee exit without looking at anyone. He yanked off his tie as he went, leaving no doubt about the outcome of his meeting with Parker. The owner emerged shortly after, his face grave but determined. He approached their table again, this time pulling up a chair to join them. "Ms. Davis, Mr. Davis?" he began, his voice heavy with sincerity. "I want you to know that Connor Miller is no longer employed at the Heights, but I also know that simply firing him isn't enough. This incident has made it clear that we have serious issues that need to be addressed." Jasmine sat up straighter, her professional instincts kicking in. She could see an opportunity emerging from this unfortunate situation, a chance to turn this personal humiliation into something constructive, something that might prevent others from experiencing similar treatment. Parker continued, his words carefully chosen. I would like to propose something, Ms. Davis, if you're willing to hear me out. I believe your experience and expertise could help us make some much-needed changes in our establishment. James Parker leaned forward in his chair, his expression earnest as he outlined his proposal. Ms. Davis, your background in corporate leadership and your personal experience tonight give you a unique perspective. I'd like to invite you to help us develop a comprehensive anti-discrimination training program for our entire staff. Jasmine exchanged a glance with her father, who gave her an encouraging nod. She turned back to Parker, her marketing director's mind already analyzing the situation. What exactly are you envisioning, Mr. Parker? Please call me James, he replied. I'm thinking beyond just a single training session. I want to create a lasting change in our culture. Your experience tonight was horrible, and I'm deeply ashamed it happened in my restaurant. But perhaps we can use this as a turning point. As Parker spoke, Jasmine noticed several staff members watching their conversation intently. Their faces showed various emotions: shame, concern, and what appeared to be hope. The young woman who had brought the club soda earlier caught her eye and smiled encouragingly. I appreciate the offer, Jasmine said carefully, but I'm not sure if I'm the right person for this. My expertise is in corporate marketing, not diversity training. That's exactly why you'd be perfect for this, Parker insisted. You understand corporate culture, how to communicate effectively, and now you've experienced firsthand what can happen when bias goes unchecked. Plus, your position as a successful executive adds weight to your words. Marcus, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. If I may, James, I think I see where you're going with this. You're not just looking for a one-time fix, are you? No, I'm not, Parker confirmed. What happened tonight made me realize we need a complete overhaul of our hiring practices, training procedures, and workplace culture. And not just here. I own 3 other restaurants in Houston, and I want to implement changes across all of them. Jasmine felt a familiar spark of excitement, the same one she got when approaching a new marketing challenge. She could see the potential impact, not just addressing one incident of discrimination, but creating a model that could influence the entire service industry in Houston. I have some conditions, she said, her professional demeanor fully engaged. First, this needs to be a comprehensive program, not just a quick sensitivity training. We're talking about changing ingrained behaviors and attitudes. Parker nodded eagerly. Absolutely. What else? Second, I want to bring in experts in diversity and inclusion training to work with us. My father can recommend some excellent consultants from his civil rights work. She glanced at Marcus, who was already pulling out his business phone. Done, Parker agreed. And third? Third, Jasmine continued, her voice firm. I want to document everything. The process, the challenges, the successes. If we're going to do this, let's create something that other restaurants can learn from. Parker's eyes lit up. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. Would you be willing to speak at restaurant industry events about this initiative? Your story could be incredibly powerful. Jasmine paused, considering the implications. Public speaking hadn't been part of her career plan, but she could see the potential impact. Her mind went to all the times she'd wished someone had spoken up, had challenged the status quo, had turned negative experiences into positive change. Yes, she decided, I'll do it. But we do this right. No cutting corners, no quick fixes. Real, lasting change takes time and commitment. Agreed, Parker said, extending his hand. When can you start? As they shook hands, Jasmine felt a shift in the atmosphere of the restaurant. The other diners, who had been pretending not to watch their conversation, broke into spontaneous applause. The staff members, who had been hovering nearby, smiled with relief and anticipation. Marcus beamed with pride. Now this is really something worth celebrating, he said, raising his water glass in a toast. Parker stood up, energized by their discussion. Let me have the kitchen prepare you a proper meal, one that actually reflects the standards of the Heights. And please, everything is on the house tonight. As Parker headed to the kitchen to personally oversee their dinner preparation, Jasmine sat back in her chair, processing the evening's dramatic turn of events. What had started as a celebration of her corporate success had transformed into something entirely unexpected, a new chapter in her professional journey, one that combined her business acumen with a deeper purpose. "You know what this means, don't you?" Marcus said softly, looking at his daughter with knowing eyes. Jasmine nodded. "This isn't just about one restaurant or one incident anymore. This is about creating real change." She smiled, thinking about the challenges and opportunities ahead. "I guess sometimes the best opportunities come from the most unexpected places." The rest of their evening took on a different tone, less a simple celebration of past achievements, and more a planning session for future impact. As they enjoyed their properly prepared meal, Jasmine and her father began sketching out ideas for the training program on napkins, their excitement growing with each new possibility they discussed. 2 weeks after the incident at the Heights, Jasmine sat in her home office, surrounded by research materials and presentations. Her promotion celebration had unexpectedly led her down a new path, one that she found increasingly engaging. She had taken a few personal days from her corporate job to focus on developing the framework for the Heights Cultural Transformation Program. The morning sun streamed through her window, illuminating her workspace where dozens of sticky notes covered her whiteboard, each containing ideas and strategies. Her laptop displayed multiple tabs of research on successful diversity initiatives, while her tablet showed statistics about discrimination in the service industry. Her phone buzzed with a text from James Parker. "Team's ready for our first meeting. Looking forward to your presentation." Jasmine smiled, thinking about how much preparation had gone into this day. She had spent countless hours consulting with diversity experts, including Dr. Sarah Chen, a renowned specialist in workplace culture transformation who her father had recommended. Together, they had crafted a comprehensive 6-month program that would go far beyond traditional sensitivity training. As she gathered her materials, her doorbell rang. It was Marcus, arriving to drive her to the Heights for the first official meeting. "Ready to change some minds, baby girl?" he asked, noting the determination in her eyes. "More than ready, Dad," she replied, collecting her laptop and presentations. "Dr. Chen is meeting us there, and we've got something special planned for today." The drive to the Heights was filled with discussion about their strategy. Marcus, having dealt with systematic change throughout his legal career, offered valuable insights about resistance they might encounter and how to address it effectively. When they arrived at the restaurant, Jasmine was pleased to see that James Parker had followed through on his commitment. The restaurant was closed for the morning, with all staff members from the Heights and Parker's other 3 restaurants present for the training. About 50 people filled the main dining room, which had been transformed into a meeting space. Dr. Chen was already there, setting up some equipment. She was a petite woman in her 50s with an air of quiet authority that commanded respect. She greeted Jasmine with a warm hug. "All set for today?" "Absolutely," Jasmine replied, connecting her laptop to the projector. She looked around the room, noticing the mix of emotions on the faces before her. Some staff members appeared eager and engaged, while others seemed skeptical or uncomfortable. It was exactly the range of reactions she had anticipated. James Parker called the room to attention. "Good morning, everyone. As you know, 2 weeks ago, an incident occurred in this restaurant that forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about our workplace culture. Today marks the beginning of our commitment to change." He gestured to Jasmine. "Ms. Davis has agreed to help us develop and implement a comprehensive cultural transformation program. She brings both corporate leadership experience and personal insight to this initiative. Please give her your full attention." Jasmine stood before the group, her marketing executive confidence in full display. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I want to start by saying that I'm not here to shame anyone or to point fingers. I'm here because I believe in the power of transformation, and because your owner has shown genuine commitment to creating positive change." She clicked to her first slide, which showed a simple question: what makes a great restaurant? "Before we dive into the specifics of our program, I want us to think about this question," she continued. "Is it just about the food, the ambiance, or is it about creating an experience where every single guest feels valued and welcome?" The room was silent, but she could see people beginning to engage with the question. A young waitress raised her hand hesitantly. "It's about making people feel special," she offered. "Exactly," Jasmine smiled. "And that's what we're here to ensure happens for every guest who walks through these doors, regardless of their race, gender, age, or any other factor. She moved through her presentation, outlining the structure of the program: weekly training sessions, role-playing exercises, guest speakers sharing their experiences, and regular progress assessments. But the heart of her presentation came when she shared her own story. 2 weeks ago, I came here to celebrate a professional achievement, she said, her voice softening slightly. Instead, I experienced something that no one should ever face when they're simply trying to enjoy a meal. But rather than let that experience define this place, we're going to use it as a catalyst for change. Dr. Chen stepped forward, adding her expertise to the discussion. Together, they laid out how the program would work, starting with basic awareness training, but quickly moving into more complex topics like unconscious bias, microaggressions, and cultural competency. As the presentation continued, Jasmine could see the mood in the room shifting. The initial skepticism began to give way to interest, especially when she revealed that staff members would be actively involved in shaping the program's development. The first month of training brought both challenges and unexpected breakthroughs. Jasmine had anticipated resistance, but she found herself surprised by the forms it took and the opportunities it presented. She sat in her office at the Heights one evening, reviewing feedback forms from the latest session, when a knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Maria Gonzalez, one of the senior servers who had initially been among the most skeptical of the program. Ms. Davis, do you have a moment? Of course, Maria, and please call me Jasmine, she replied, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Maria sat down, her usually confident demeanor somewhat subdued. I wanted to tell you something. When this program started, I thought it was just damage control, you know? But yesterday something happened that made me understand why this matters so much. She went on to describe an interaction with a mixed-race family that had come to the restaurant. Before the training, I might not have noticed the subtle ways another server was treating them differently, but this time I saw it, and I knew what to do about it. Jasmine leaned forward, intrigued. What did you do? I spoke to the server privately, just like we practiced in the role-playing sessions. I helped him recognize what he was doing, and by the end of their meal he had completely changed his approach. The family left happy, and more importantly, the server understood why his initial behavior had been problematic. This was exactly the kind of ripple effect Jasmine had hoped to create. She made notes about Maria's experience, planning to incorporate it into future training sessions. The program was evolving in ways she hadn't expected. What had started as sensitivity training had grown into a comprehensive cultural transformation initiative. Staff members were not only learning about bias and discrimination, but actively working to create a more inclusive environment. James Parker had become one of the program's strongest advocates. He had already implemented changes in hiring practices across all his restaurants and was working with Jasmine to document everything for a potential industry-wide model. One afternoon, while Jasmine was preparing for a session, she received an unexpected email. The Texas Restaurant Association had heard about their initiative and wanted her to speak at their annual conference. The subject line read, "Invitation to Present, Creating Inclusive Restaurant Cultures." As she read the email, her father called. "Have you checked the local news website?" Marcus asked, his voice excited. Jasmine opened a new browser tab and found the article, "Houston Restaurants' Innovative Approach to Addressing Bias Gains National Attention." The piece detailed how the Heights program was becoming a model for other establishments, with several Houston restaurants already reaching out to learn more. "Dad, this is getting bigger than I ever imagined," she said, still processing the implications. "That's what happens when you turn pain into purpose, baby girl," Marcus replied. "Remember when you were little and you'd throw pebbles in Herman Park Pond? How the ripples would spread? And you'd tell me that's how change works," Jasmine finished, smiling at the memory. "One small action can create waves of transformation." The next training session proved particularly powerful. Jasmine had invited several guests from different backgrounds to share their dining experiences. Their stories resonated deeply with the staff, putting faces and emotions to the abstract concepts they'd been discussing. During a break, James Parker pulled Jasmine aside. "We've seen a 40% increase in positive reviews since we started the program," he said. "But more importantly, our staff turnover has dropped significantly. People want to work here because they feel part of something meaningful." Jasmine nodded, thinking about how far they'd come in just a month. The skepticism she'd initially encountered had largely given way to engagement and enthusiasm. Staff members were actively participating in discussions, sharing their own experiences, and proposing improvements to the program. As she wrapped up that day's session, Jasmine noticed a young hostess lingering behind. "Ms. Davis," the girl began hesitantly, "I wanted to ask, would you mentor me? I'm studying business at Houston Community College, and seeing what you've done here, it's inspired me to think bigger about my future." Jasmine felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was an unexpected but welcome development. "I'd be honored," she replied, already thinking about how she could help guide this young woman's journey. Later that evening, as Jasmine drove home, she reflected on how a single incident of discrimination had sparked such significant change. The program wasn't just about preventing negative behaviors anymore. It had become a catalyst for positive transformation, both personal and professional. The Texas Restaurant Association conference room buzzed with anticipation. Hundreds of restaurant owners, managers, and industry professionals filled the space, all eager to hear about the program that had been making waves across Houston's dining scene. Jasmine stood backstage, reviewing her presentation notes one last time. "Oh, you've got this," Dr. Chen whispered, giving her shoulder a supportive squeeze. Over the past 3 months, they had become close friends and allies in their mission for change. James Parker approached, beaming with pride. "Full house out there. Word's really gotten around about what we've accomplished." Jasmine nodded, thinking about how far they'd come. The Heights program had exceeded all expectations, with measurable improvements in customer satisfaction, staff retention, and overall restaurant performance. But more importantly, it had created a ripple effect throughout Houston's restaurant community. The conference moderator's voice boomed through the speakers. "Please welcome our keynote speaker, Jasmine Davis, creator of the Cultural Excellence in Dining initiative." As Jasmine walked onto the stage, she saw her father in the front row, camera ready. Some things never changed. The audience welcomed her with warm applause, and she felt a surge of confidence as she began her presentation. 3 months ago, I experienced discrimination at what should have been a celebration dinner," she began, her voice strong and clear. "Today, I'm here to share how that moment transformed not just one restaurant, but potentially an entire industry." She proceeded to outline the program's key components: comprehensive staff training, community engagement, measurable outcomes, and most importantly, the creation of a sustainable culture of inclusion. The audience was particularly interested in the practical aspects, how to implement similar programs in their own establishments. "The most surprising outcome," Jasmine continued, "wasn't the improved customer satisfaction scores or the increased revenue. It was the way our staff became ambassadors for change in their own communities." She shared stories of transformation: the server who started a mentorship program for minority youth interested in hospitality careers, the chef who initiated cooking classes that celebrated diverse culinary traditions, the hostess who organized community dinners that brought together people from different backgrounds. During the Q&A session, a restaurant owner from Austin raised his hand. "The results are impressive, but let's talk costs. How do you justify the investment?" Jasmine smiled. She'd anticipated this question. "Let me show you our ROI analysis." She clicked to a slide showing clear statistics. "In the first 3 months alone, we saw a 60% reduction in customer complaints, a 45% decrease in staff turnover, and a 35% increase in repeat customers. The program pays for itself through improved efficiency and increased business." Another participant asked about resistance from staff or customers. "Absolutely, we faced resistance," Jasmine acknowledged. "But we found that transparency and inclusion in the process were key. We didn't just impose changes, we involved everyone in creating solutions." After her presentation, several restaurant owners approached her about implementing similar programs in their establishments. One of them, a woman who owned a chain of Tex-Mex restaurants, was particularly enthusiastic. "Ms. Davis, your program is exactly what our industry needs," she said. "Would you consider consulting for other restaurants? We need this kind of transformation across Texas." Jasmine exchanged glances with Dr. Chen, who nodded encouragingly. They had discussed the possibility of expanding their work, but this was the first concrete opportunity. Later that evening, Jasmine sat with her father at their favorite local diner, sharing a slice of pecan pie and discussing the day's events. "You know what this means, don't you?" Marcus asked, his eyes twinkling. "You're not just changing restaurants anymore. You're changing the whole conversation about diversity in the service industry." Jasmine took a thoughtful bite of pie. "I've been thinking about that. The corporate world has been working on diversity initiatives for years, but the service industry has been largely overlooked. There's so much potential for impact here." Her phone buzzed with a text from James Parker. "Local news wants to do a feature story on our program. They're calling it A Recipe for Change. Interested?" As she showed the message to her father, another text came in, this one from Maria Gonzalez. "You won't believe what happened today. A customer recognized me from the community dinner program and brought her whole family in. They said they'd heard about our inclusive culture. We're really making a difference." Jasmine felt a familiar surge of excitement. The program was growing beyond anything she'd imagined, touching lives in unexpected ways. She thought about the young hostess she was mentoring, who was now organizing study groups at her community college to discuss workplace diversity. The Houston Chronicle interview was scheduled for a quiet Tuesday afternoon at the Heights. Jasmine arrived early, wanting to ensure everything was perfect. As she walked through the restaurant, she noticed how much had changed in the past 4 months. The staff moved with a new confidence, their interactions with customers marked by genuine warmth and cultural awareness. Sarah Martinez, the Chronicle's feature writer, arrived precisely on time. "Ms. Davis, thank you for meeting with me. Your program has created quite a buzz in the hospitality industry." They settled into a quiet corner booth, and Sarah began her questions. "What inspired you to turn a negative experience into such a comprehensive program?" Jasmine thought carefully before responding. Initially I just wanted to ensure no one else would face what I faced. But as we developed the program, we discovered that creating real change required more than just addressing individual incidents. It needed a complete cultural transformation." As they talked, Jasmine shared stories of the program's impact, the increased diversity in their customer base, the improved employee satisfaction, and the unexpected ways the initiative had touched the broader community. "And now you're expanding beyond the Heights?" Sarah asked, scribbling notes. "Yes," Jasmine confirmed. "We're launching a consulting firm specializing in cultural transformation for the service industry. Dr. Chen and I are partnering with James Parker to create a model that can be implemented in restaurants across the country." The interview was interrupted by an unexpected visitor, Connor Miller, the former server whose actions had sparked this whole journey. He stood awkwardly at the edge of their booth, looking very different from the arrogant waiter of 4 months ago. "Ms. Davis," he said quietly, "I heard you were here today. Could I speak with you for a moment?" Sarah, the reporter, looked intrigued, but Jasmine asked for privacy. They moved to a quiet corner of the restaurant. "I've been following the changes you've made here," Connor began, his voice heavy with emotion. "After I lost my job, I did a lot of thinking. I want to apologize. My behavior was inexcusable." Jasmine studied him carefully. "What have you been doing since then?" "Actually, that's part of why I'm here," he replied. "I've been working with a community organization that helps at-risk youth. It's opened my eyes to my own prejudices and the damage they can cause. I'm not asking for my job back, but I wanted you to know that your program, it's making waves beyond just the restaurant industry." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a group of restaurant owners from Dallas who had come to observe the Heights program in action. James Parker had been hosting these observation sessions regularly, part of their effort to spread the initiative's impact. As Jasmine wrapped up her conversation with Connor and returned to the interview, she felt a sense of completion. His transformation was unexpected, but powerful evidence that change was possible, even in the most resistant hearts. The rest of the afternoon was a whirlwind of activity. The Dallas restaurant owners were deeply impressed by what they saw, particularly the natural way the staff incorporated cultural awareness into their service. Several of them immediately expressed interest in implementing similar programs in their establishments. That evening, Jasmine sat in her office reviewing the draft business plan for the consulting firm. Dr. Chen had suggested naming it Catalyst Hospitality Solutions, reflecting their goal of sparking industry-wide change. Her phone lit up with a message from her corporate job. They wanted to meet about her increasing involvement in the restaurant program. She had been balancing both roles for months, but it was becoming clear that a choice would soon be necessary. As she drove home that evening, Jasmine reflected on how differently her life had turned out from what she'd planned. 4 months ago, she had been celebrating a corporate promotion. Now she was on the verge of launching her own consulting firm, speaking at industry conferences, and creating lasting change in an entire sector. Her father's words from years ago echoed in her mind. Sometimes the path you're meant to take isn't the one you planned. She smiled, thinking about how right he had been. The next morning would bring another training session, another opportunity to shape minds and change hearts. But tonight, Jasmine simply sat on her balcony, watching the Houston skyline shimmer in the distance, feeling grateful for the unexpected turns that had led her here. The corporate boardroom felt different now. Jasmine sat across from her CEO and HR director, both of whom wore expressions of concerned support. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the Houston skyline behind them. "Jasmine, your work with the Heights and the restaurant industry has been remarkable," her CEO began, "but we need to discuss how it's affecting your role here. Your recent projects have been delayed, and some clients are expressing concern about your availability." She nodded, having anticipated this conversation for weeks. "I understand, Robert. I know I've been stretched thin trying to manage both responsibilities." "We value you immensely," the HR director added, "and we'd like to propose a solution. What if we created a new position? You could head up our corporate diversity initiatives, using your experience from the restaurant program." It was a generous offer, one that would have seemed perfect just a few months ago. But Jasmine felt a slight hesitation that surprised her. Her mind wandered to the previous day's events at the Heights. She had watched Maria Gonzalez lead a training session for new staff members, explaining the importance of cultural awareness with confidence and passion. The young hostess she was mentoring had presented a proposal for a community outreach program that had impressed everyone. Dr. Chen had shared the latest data showing significant improvements in customer satisfaction and staff retention across all of Parker's restaurants. "I appreciate the offer," Jasmine said carefully, "but I need some time to think it over. The restaurant program is at a crucial point of expansion." Her CEO nodded understandingly. "Take the week to decide. We want to support you, whatever you choose." Leaving the office, Jasmine drove to her father's law firm. She found him in his office, surrounded by case files, but ready to make time for her. "Dad, I need your advice," she began, settling into the familiar leather chair across from his desk. "The company offered me a new position heading up their diversity initiatives, but your heart's pulling you in another direction," Marcus finished, showing his usual insight. "Tell me what you're thinking, baby girl." "The restaurant program is growing beyond anything we imagined. We're not just changing one restaurant anymore, we're transforming an entire industry. Dr. Chen and I have requests from restaurants across Texas, and the consulting firm is ready to launch. But taking that path means leaving the corporate security I've worked so hard for." Marcus leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Remember when you were 10 and you wanted to quit piano lessons to focus on debate club? You said something then that stuck with me. Do you remember what it was?" Jasmine smiled, the memory coming back clearly. "I said I needed to follow the path that let me help the most people." "Exactly. And what path do you think that is now?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from James Parker. "Just got calls from 3 more restaurant groups in Austin. They want to implement our program. Also, Food and Wine magazine wants to feature our initiative in their next issue." Following close behind was a message from Dr. Chen. "Jasmine, the data from our latest assessment is amazing. We're seeing cultural transformation that goes beyond the restaurants into the broader community. When can we meet to discuss expansion plans?" Marcus watched as she read the messages, noting the spark in her eyes. "Looks like you might already have your answer," he said softly. Jasmine looked up at her father, feeling a mix of excitement and uncertainty. "The corporate world is what I know. It's safe, secure. This new path, there's so much unknown." "True," Marcus agreed, "but sometimes the greatest impact comes from stepping into the unknown. Look at what you've already accomplished in just a few months. Imagine what you could do if you devoted yourself to it fully." They were interrupted by another message, this one from Maria. "You won't believe what happened today. Remember that family that felt uncomfortable dining here before? They just hosted their daughter's graduation dinner here. They said they chose us because they heard about our inclusive culture. We're really making a difference." Jasmine felt tears welling up in her eyes. These weren't just business metrics or professional accomplishments. These were real people's lives being changed. The corporate position would be prestigious and secure, but would it allow her to create the kind of deep, meaningful change she was seeing in the restaurant program? "I think I know what I need to do," she said finally, her voice stronger. "But I'm going to need your help, Dad. This is bigger than just me now." Marcus smiled, pride evident in his eyes. "Whatever you need, baby girl. You know I'm always here for you." The launch event for Catalyst Hospitality Solutions transformed the Heights main dining room into an elegant conference space. Restaurant owners, industry leaders, and community representatives filled the room, all eager to learn about the initiative that had been making headlines across Texas. Jasmine stood at the podium, feeling surprisingly calm, despite the magnitude of the moment. In the front row sat her father, Dr. Chen, and James Parker, her core support team. Behind them were Maria, the young hostess she mentored, and other staff members who had been part of the program's development. "6 months ago," she began, "I walked into this restaurant expecting a simple celebration dinner. Instead, I found my true calling. Today, we're not just launching a consulting firm, we're launching a movement to transform the hospitality industry." The presentation that followed showcased the remarkable results of their pilot program. Dr. Chen presented data showing dramatic improvements in customer satisfaction, staff retention, and community engagement across all of Parker's restaurants. Maria shared powerful stories of cultural transformation from the staff's perspective. But the most compelling moment came when James Parker introduced a surprise guest, another restaurant owner who had implemented their program 2 months ago. "In just 8 weeks," the owner testified, "we've seen a complete transformation in our workplace culture. Our staff is more engaged, our customers are more diverse, and our community connection has never been stronger. This program isn't just good ethics, it's good business." During the networking session that followed, Jasmine found herself surrounded by restaurant owners eager to implement the program. She noticed how naturally Maria and other staff members fielded questions, sharing their experiences with genuine enthusiasm. Her former CEO approached her with a warm smile. "I have to admit, when you turned down our offer, I thought you were making a mistake. But seeing all this," he gestured around the room, "you've created something extraordinary here." "Thank you," Jasmine replied sincerely. "It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one." As the event wound down, Dr. Chen pulled her aside. "We just got an inquiry from a restaurant association in California. They want to know if we can expand beyond Texas." Jasmine's mind raced with possibilities. They had already established a solid foundation in Houston, with documented success stories and a growing network of participating restaurants. Expansion to other states would require careful planning, but the potential impact was enormous. Later that evening, as the last guest departed, Jasmine found herself alone in the dining room where it all began. She sat at the same table where she and her father had experienced that difficult night 6 months ago. Marcus joined her, sliding into the chair across from her. "Proud of you, baby girl," he said softly. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Dad," she replied. "Your support, your guidance." "No," he interrupted gently. "You did this. You took a painful experience and transformed it into something powerful. You're changing lives, Jasmine." As if to prove his point, Maria approached their table. "Miss Davis, Jasmine, I wanted to show you something." She handed over a letter from a local community college. "I've been accepted into their business program. Watching you these past months showed me what's possible when you believe in yourself." Jasmine hugged her, feeling the full circle moment. From that difficult night to this moment of triumph, every step had led her exactly where she needed to be. James Parker joined them, champagne glasses in hand. "Our toast," he proposed, "to new beginnings and positive change." As they raised their glasses, Jasmine looked around at the faces of people who had become more than colleagues. They were partners in a mission that had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. The corporate world had offered her success, but this path had given her something more valuable: purpose. Her phone buzzed with yet another inquiry about the program, this time from a restaurant group in Chicago. The movement they'd started was growing, spreading beyond state lines, touching more lives with each passing day. 1 year to the day after the incident that changed everything, The Heights was hosting a special event. The restaurant's elegant interior was filled with people from across the country. Restaurant owners, industry leaders, and community activists who had been touched by the Catalyst Hospitality Solutions program. Jasmine stood in the kitchen, watching the busy staff prepare for the evening. The kitchen itself had become a model of inclusive excellence, with a diverse team working in seamless harmony. Chef Miguel, who had been instrumental in developing cross-cultural training programs, was directing his team with practiced efficiency. "Can you believe it's been a year?" Dr. Chen asked, joining her at the kitchen entrance. "Sometimes I have to remind myself how this all started." Jasmine smiled, remembering the journey. In just 12 months, their program had expanded to over 100 restaurants across 5 states. The consulting firm had grown from a 2-person operation to a team of 15 dedicated professionals, each bringing unique perspectives and expertise to their mission. "Ms. Davis," a familiar voice caught her attention. She turned to find Connor Miller standing there, looking nervous but determined. He had contacted her office a week ago, asking to speak at tonight's event. After careful consideration, she had agreed. "Thank you for allowing me to be here," he said. "I've been working with that youth organization for the past year and, well, I think my story might help others understand why this work is so important." Before she could respond, Maria hurried over. "Jasmine, the documentary crew is ready for your interview. They want to film in the main dining room." The documentary had been an unexpected development. A prominent streaming service had approached them about featuring their story in a series about transformative social initiatives. Tonight's event would be part of the final episode. As Jasmine walked through the restaurant, she noticed the subtle but significant changes that had taken place over the past year. The staff was notably diverse. The artwork on the walls celebrated multiple cultures, and even the menu had evolved to reflect a broader cultural palette while maintaining its upscale appeal. The documentary interviewer, a renowned journalist, settled into her chair. "Ms. Davis, you've created something remarkable here. What do you think is the key to your program's success?" Jasmine thought carefully before responding. "Authenticity," she said finally. "We're not just teaching people to follow rules or recite politically correct phrases. We're helping them understand the human impact of their actions and empowering them to create real change." The interview was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected guest, the mayor of Houston. She had heard about the program's impact on the city's restaurant industry and wanted to see it firsthand. "Ms. Davis," the mayor said warmly, "your initiative has done more than transform restaurants. It's helping change the culture of our city. We're seeing reduced incidents of discrimination across the service industry, and other sectors are taking notice." As the evening's formal program began, Jasmine watched from the side as various speakers shared their experiences. Restaurant owners spoke about improved business metrics and stronger community connections. Staff members described personal transformations and newfound pride in their work. When Connor took the stage, a hush fell over the room. "A year ago, I was the problem this program was created to solve," he began honestly. "Today, I'm proof that change is possible when we open our hearts and minds to understanding others." His testimony was powerful, but what moved Jasmine most was watching the current staff of the Heights, people of all backgrounds working together with natural ease and genuine respect. This wasn't just about preventing discrimination anymore, it was about creating a new standard for workplace culture. Maria, now enrolled in business school while managing floor operations at the Heights, stood to share her story. "This program didn't just change how we work, it changed how we see ourselves and each other. We're not just serving food, we're serving humanity." As the evening progressed, Jasmine found herself back at that familiar table where everything had started. Her father joined her, sliding into his usual seat. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the room full of people who had become part of their extended family. The morning after the anniversary celebration, Jasmine arrived early at the Heights. The restaurant was quiet, sunlight streaming through the windows, creating patterns on the polished wooden floors. She walked through the space, touching tables and chairs that now held so many stories of transformation. Her phone buzzed with messages from across the country, restaurant owners sharing success stories, staff members expressing gratitude, and community leaders requesting partnerships. But one message stood out, an invitation to speak at the National Restaurant Association's annual convention. They wanted her to deliver the keynote address, about creating lasting cultural change in the industry. As she sat at her desk reviewing the invitation, Dr. Chen arrived with their latest impact report. The numbers are extraordinary, Jasmine. We're seeing sustained improvement in every metric we track, but more importantly, we're seeing cultural shifts that extend beyond the restaurants into the broader community. James Parker joined them, carrying fresh coffee and pastries. Have you seen today's Houston Chronicle? They're calling our program a blueprint for social change through business transformation. He spread the newspaper on her desk, showing the feature article that included interviews with staff members, customers, and industry experts. We've come so far, Jasmine mused, but there's still so much work to do. The young hostess she had mentored, now a junior manager studying business, knocked on the door. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you. She says she's from the Smithsonian. The visitor turned out to be a curator from the National Museum of American History. Ms. Davis, we're developing an exhibit about transformative moments in American business culture. We'd like to include your story and the Catalyst program. Would you be willing to contribute materials and documentation? Jasmine felt overwhelmed. The idea that their work would be preserved as part of American history hadn't occurred to her. As she discussed the details with the curator, her father arrived for their standing breakfast meeting. "Look at this, Dad," she said, showing him the museum proposal. "Can you believe it?" Marcus smiled proudly. "I can. You didn't just create a training program, baby girl. You created a movement." They walked together through the restaurant, now preparing for the lunch service. The kitchen was alive with activity, staff members calling out greetings as they passed. In the dining room, Maria was training a new server, emphasizing not just service techniques but cultural awareness and emotional intelligence. "Remember," Maria was saying, "every guest who walks through that door brings their own story, their own experiences. Our job is to make sure they all feel equally valued and welcomed." Jasmine paused to watch, remembering how far Maria had come from the skeptical server she'd been a year ago. Now she was helping shape the next generation of hospitality professionals. As they settled into their usual table for breakfast, Marcus reached into his briefcase. "I have something for you," he said, pulling out a small, wrapped package. "Open it." Inside was a beautifully bound journal. On the first page, in his elegant handwriting, was a quote, "Change begins with one person's courage to imagine something better." "I started writing this the night of the incident," he explained. "I've documented everything. The challenges, the victories, the moments of doubt and the breakthroughs. I thought you might want to have it. Maybe use it someday when you write your own book." Jasmine felt tears welling up as she flipped through the pages, seeing their journey through her father's eyes. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." Through the windows, they could see Houston coming alive with morning activity. Somewhere out there, hundreds of restaurants were opening their doors, welcoming guests with a new awareness and commitment to inclusion. Thousands of staff members were beginning their days with the tools and training to create more equitable spaces. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Jasmine said, looking around at what they'd built. "It's not the awards or the recognition. It's that somewhere today someone will walk into a restaurant and feel welcomed, valued, and respected, maybe for the first time, and that's worth everything." Marcus smiled, raising his coffee cup in a toast. "To changing the world, one table at a time." "One table at a time," Jasmine echoed, clinking her cup against his. As the first customers of the day began to arrive, Jasmine watched her vision in action. A diverse staff working together seamlessly, customers from all walks of life being treated with equal respect and warmth, the subtle but powerful transformation of everyday interactions. She opened her father's journal to its last page, where he had left space for her to write. Taking out her pen, she began, "1 year ago, an incident of discrimination changed my life. Today, that moment of pain has become a catalyst for healing, growth, and transformation. This is not the end of our story. It's just the beginning."